Welcome, everyone. It's great to be with you today. And it is great to be able to welcome Mike Brandolfino, who is President and COO of Caregility, to join us today to talk about AI, artificial intelligence. Mike, it's always great to connect with you. How are you?
Thanks. How are you, Mark? Thank you for having me.
I'm great. Thanks. Yeah, great to have you here. So let's talk a little bit about some of these big picture issues that are coming up right now that are emerging as we go into through this journey around artificial intelligence in healthcare. Everyone's heard of the Gartner hype cycle. We need to find out where we are on the Gartner hype cycle. So that's my first question to you, Mike. With all the talk about AI in healthcare, how can people separate hype from actual opportunity?
Sure. I think at an event recently, you and I talked about this. I think we are in the trough of disillusionment right now.
Yes.
There are literally hundreds of .ai companies out there popping up all over the place, and they're telling a really grand story about what they can do. And don't get me wrong, I think there's some really fantastic technology out there. I think the challenge is, how we apply it and whether or not it's going to add value to the current challenges that health systems are facing. Some of those challenges are, everybody's well known. It's shortage of nurses, shortage of doctors. How are you dealing with patients in their homes? Health inequity. It's how is AI going to help those things? I think when we could figure that out and the dust settles and we understand the workflow that AI can apply to, and also the reality of the realm of what it actually can do versus what they say it can do.
Yeah, I have to say, and I know you're only 29, so you won't remember this, but I have to say, I remember the early 90s and in healthcare IT. And one of the wild things was one would go to a big conference like the HIMSS conference, and there would just be so much vaporware and so many promises. And I had experiences where I visited a vendor's booth and I walked away not knowing what they did, right? Like, what do you do? And then after a half-hour conversation in which they would say, well, we optimize the optimization of optimizing, and you go, well, like, what does that do? So one of the things that I think is really interesting right now is we're starting to figure out what AI actually can do, as opposed to what it's predicted to do. What types of AI technologies are showing the most promise right now that you've seen in terms of when they're incorporated into acute virtual encounters?
Yeah, there is some pretty good technology out there that we're starting to play with, and I want to quantify too AI. I think people throw AI at a lot of technology that is it really AI? So the way I kind of term it is it augmenting the information that a clinician or caregiver can have, so that they can have more information than maybe they would be able to get on their own, or is it taking tasks over that potentially could save them time, or is it a tool that adds to productivity? So is it real tangible something that it's doing that can help? And so there's a number of different categories, and one of the ones that we're really excited about is a radar, a contactless device. It's a radar device that does resting heart rate, resting breathing rate, and motion in the room. And so first thing is, okay, now you can have something that's constantly monitoring, but isn't a video camera on all the time. And so you can see trending over time. And the AI part of that is they've done algorithms around changes in that pattern means something. But more importantly, and I kind of talked about this in terms of providing trending data, but then actionable data. So if that radar device, for example, can tell you based on those telemetry that the patient is starting to wake up, Now think of a post-op situation where the nurses have to be there when the patient wakes up because they're disoriented.
Right.
Can you just have a contactless device in there, notify them, hey, the patient is starting to wake up, so they can get in there, but they don't have to sit there, for 30 minutes waiting. That's one example where I think we're going to see some great,
Yeah.
the things that gather telemetry and do some analysis of that, not to make a decision, but to give, caregivers some information, I think is one of the ones that we're excited about.
Yeah, exactly. And that first example you brought up, some organizations are using the term virtual sitting right now,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So that rather than, as you said, I mean, we're so short-staffed in healthcare, and having to have people literally sit physically, we just can't afford to do that anymore. So this is a wonderful use. So in your view, Mike, which clinical workflows will care teams and patients benefit most from in the context of telehealth?
I definitely think it's in contactless monitoring.
Yeah.
And the ability to gather metrics or telemetry from patients in a contactless way, I think is going to be the most benefit. Because if you think about what happens in a situation with nurses where they do their rounds and they go and they take the blood pressure or whatever, they take the vital signs, and many times they don't get that into the EHR until the end of their shift.
Yeah.
Or hours later.
Yeah.
And within these tools, there's algorithms, right? There's algorithms that are taking that data and trying to evaluate, is the patient getting better or worse? But if that data is delayed, that you're not actually improving patient care. But if we can figure out a way to gather that data many times during the day, get it into that algorithm, we might be able to actually improve outcomes faster. So I think gathering vital signs and information about the patient real time and contactless, I think is really one of the most beneficial ones that we'll see.
Absolutely. And I think the key phrase there is at the point of care.
Correct.
If we can change decision making and activity at the point of care, it will be really impactful. I agree with you. So what are some of the caveats that people should be considering as they think about how they're going to take these AI tools and leverage them into actual patient care delivery?
This is something, I'm going to be a little facetious, but I think what we're seeing is companies that had technology that monitored whether there were parking spots in your garage are suddenly trying to apply that to a clinical workflow. And so I think what health systems really need to be careful of is getting enamored by the technology before understanding where it fits into the workflow. I think that's the biggest mistake folks make. The other thing that, and we grapple with this because we provide a platform that delivers two-way video in an inpatient environment. How is this going to fit into your network environment if you're in an inpatient setting? If you're going to try and do this on an outpatient setting, how is it going to work with patients who, are on an iPhone, on a cell phone, so to speak, or a tablet? So I think stepping back, I always try and recommend to customers when you're looking at these things, don't just take it from a clinical perspective. You need to include all of the stakeholders. So your IT folks, how are you going to support this? How are you going to support a fleet of these things? Clearly the clinical workflow, the experience on the patient side. What are all the aspects of what you're trying to get, and what is the impact of this technology within that workflow? And then, once you decide that, then you might have some choices to make around which technologies to pick. But then you can have to ask the right questions, about whether or not they've done this in 2 or 3 hospital rooms or thousands of hospital rooms,
Yeah. And I think one of the things you're alluding to is this terrible bright, shiny object phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
Like you hear, Susie heard that, ABC Hospital down the road just did this thing and it's so cool. And that's the wrong way to think about it, right?
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. You have to think about use case, you have to think about the stakeholders, and you have to think about how everything will be operated and managed. And per that, what are some of the integration and support challenges that you think people should be thinking about?
So I'm going to tell you a little story, and then I'll go into that. So I met with a company that had what sounded like the greatest idea going, and that was taking the video image and being able to encode for billing what the nurses were doing in the room. Sounds great. Wow, really cool. Then we would talk to them, and they go, yeah, all that has to happen is nurses have to wear cameras on their lapel. And I'm like, time out.
Yeah.
Not going to happen, guys. And they're like, no, yeah, well, we're going to get, we're going to get the nurses. I'm like, no, you don't understand. That's just not going to happen. If they're gowned up, or forget about that. They're just not going to wear a camera, right? And so I think what that does is people need to think about the operational logistics of supporting what they're doing and who has to support it. We had one customer saying that they wanted to empower the patient and install an iPhone app that allows them control the video system in the room. And when our chief nursing officer, Wendy, looked at it, she goes, and who's going to be called when they can't figure that out? The nurses. So I think what we need to really, what we try and suggest to our customers is understand the impact that you're going to have on the staff on the floor.
Yes.
And think about what that scale is going to be like, what the operational impact is going to be like, not just in supporting the technology, but in supporting the patients if they're engaged in part of this, and so I think a lot of times programs fail because either they haven't thought of that or they didn't get the buy-in from the nurses, right? And so the nurses are literally, just not going to cooperate. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. They don't have the time. They just don't have the time. And I think you need to really understand the impact of that before you deploy technology.
Yeah, and if I may, to support what you just said, Mike, a couple of things. First of all, as you know, nurses are the most interrupted people in healthcare. Yeah. So if you create something that adds more interruptions or more things to have to think about, it's really tough right now. And I think the other element there, and I completely agree with you with you on this, there was a time, and things are getting a little bit better now, but we were hearing nurses were saying, I'm starting to wear carpenter tool belts. Right? Because I have so many devices, like it becomes ridiculous. No human being should be carrying 6 different devices on a belt on them, maybe construction workers, right? But not nurses, that, and because of that, and the fact that they're so interrupted already, we have to think about the impact on floor nurses and other people who will be interacting with the technology, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting. We have a customer that's doing a telenursing program, and the interesting thing, they're doing a study, but they're not doing a study on just the outcome of using that. They're doing a study on the quality of life of the nurses. Yeah. The reduction potentially in turnover, because replacing a nurse is extremely expensive. So there are customers who are seeing that they need to pay attention to that aspect of deploying technology.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so great. So give me your sense of how you view this concept of hybrid care instead of virtual care when we're talking about telehealth. I think it's a really interesting question. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so hybrid care is really our kind of mantra about what we're trying to help our customers with. We at our kickoff meeting this year, we identified for our company our true north, and our true north is empowering caregivers, right? And if you really boil it all down to that, and so that's what we're trying to do with our customers, is provide them with tools and capability that empowers the caregivers in whatever way we can. And so hybrid care is really an extension of that, in that, can you augment the floor nurse with skill sets that aren't available all the time, or that you may not need all the time? And so adding that virtual nurse to what's happening at the bedside can be really impactful. And think of it in things like, how many nurses specialize in burn care, right? Well, you could have one virtual nurse supporting a
Yes.
number of hospitals, and younger nurses or less experienced nurses who don't have the skills, and walk them through it. You could do things like drug verifications,
Yeah.
um, discharges. A lot of our customers are really starting
Yes.
with discharges. And what that does is it opens up a pool of resources that were no longer available for the floor nurse position.
Right.
Bad knees, bad backs, right? So physical,
Correct.
not able to do it. People that maybe took early retirement, but still have a passion to maybe give 4 hours
Yes.
a day, right? So
Right.
you open up the pool of nurses. So we believe that combining that remote nurse with the skills that you need, with the bedside nurse and technology to
Yeah.
help gather telemetry around what's going on in the room and give that to both of them, we believe will be really impactful in improving care of patients long term.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned one thing too. I just interviewed someone about this. Um, Having a virtual discharge team that is bigger than what you normally have, because you can gather certain clinicians or others, but you can't always gather them physically together, right?
Correct.
And
Yeah.
you can improve the discharge process, which will be great for everybody ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact,
Yeah.
one of our customers, the physical in-person discharge process was around 25 minutes. Since they started doing virtual, they've
Yeah.
gotten so efficient, it's gotten down to 14 minutes.
Wow.
And the patient satisfaction has gone up as well. You know, so you're able to kind of really streamline
Yes.
a little bit as well. So I think there's benefits all around.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everything that you're saying is really about how to be smart, right?
Right.
Right, rather than just saying, and I know that really thoughtful CIOs, CMIOs, CTOs, et cetera, are always trying to do this rather than just grabbing new technology. One of the reasons why, and you had referred to this earlier on in our conversation, there can be resistance to implementations because leaders in the organization haven't thought through all these issues, right?
Correct.
Does it add to nurses' burden? Does it make their day more difficult? Right? Like procedurally, does it make more difficult? So I agree with you completely. This is really great. So what is Caregility's strategy for AI in terms of our audience? How are you guys thinking about all of this broadly?
Yeah, so we actually went down a path a couple of years ago of thinking that we were going to buy one of these .ai companies, specifically around video analysis. And through the process, we started realizing that might not be the best strategy. And the reason is we would never be able to invest enough to keeping up with it and getting it where it needs to be, because there's a lot of learning that has to happen. Yeah. And so we switched our approach where we are considered a platform in the category that we're in. And we provide a platform that allows two-way video communications from an ICU to the home. And we've developed workflows that enhance that experience. And so our philosophy is, well, if you already have a really high-end camera and high-end microphone in the room with edge processing, which our devices have, what else can you gather from that room and give to the caregivers to augment what they're doing? So our approach is really to be a platform that enables it. And so, if you want to use a technology to do transcription services, we have the microphones in the room, so you can do that. But if you start with one and that company doesn't get its funding next year and you have to find a new one, you don't have to worry about it because you're leveraging a platform that you already invested in. Same thing with video analysis. You already got a camera in the room, high-end camera in the room. Don't put another camera. That doesn't make sense. Or you want to gather the X-ray device that we said that plugs right into a USB port on our devices. So again, you don't have to add more infrastructure, more things. There's limited wall space as it is in a hospital room. Our philosophy is let us be the platform
right
that connects all these. And really, we think of it as investment insurance. You don't have to worry about whether those companies are going to disappear because we can plug into another one.
Right. And you've kind of indirectly referred to the dark underbelly of all this, which is startups that don't last, startups
Yeah,
that stop. Your company is very stable and you are very strategic. There are a lot of startups, you go to these conferences and you see Ideal IT or whatever,
yeah,
and you visit them and it's like, how many people do you have? Well, we have 3 people. We're, and
yeah,
then, we almost have funding. I think you're bringing up a really good point there, which is you have to invest with solutions partners that are going to be stable, have a long-term strategy, and we'll be here tomorrow, right? I
yeah.
mean, that's
And be flexible, right? We're not saying, by the way, I'm
yeah,
not saying that any of those provide, I hope they all make it. That'd be great. But
yeah,
we know reality. What we're saying is to our customers is, you know, don't don't feel like you need to put in a siloed solution just to get access to this AI technology.
yeah,
Really look for players that are capable of integrating with what you have. And then if they're successful, that's great. Then you stick with them and you grow with them. If they're not, you have the flexibility, which is why we've picked some partners. We have partners in the video
yeah,
analysis, in the transcription, and the radar.
yeah,
But we're basically saying to customers, yeah, we could bring them in, but if you have someone else you want to work with, just connect them with us. So it really, we're hoping that and it has been resonating with customers, that they understand that they don't have to worry about trying new things if they stick with a standard platform in the middle.
right. Absolutely. Great. So zooming back up to 40,000 feet above, uh, how is this landscape going to evolve forward? What do you see in the next few years? And what should our audience really be thinking about strategically?
So I'm a technology guy. I've been a CTO in my career, but I've always been a believer in you don't put technology in for technology's sake. And so what I would basically think that what I think our customers are going to do, you're going to have some bleeding edge organizations that are going to try it all. They're going to do POCs and all kinds of cool stuff. But the ones that I think are going to have the most impact are the ones that are really looking at real world business issues that they're facing today and apply technology in support of that. And then out of that will come reasons to use AI, will become the right, we'll get to that slope of enlightenment and we'll get to that plateau of productivity, and they will work their way in. But I think if our customers focus on the real problems that they're having today around shortage of nurses, around
Yeah,
productivity, about quality of life for their staff, applying technology that helps with that will open the door for all these other cool technologies to find their place.
yeah, I absolutely agree, Mike. And I have to tell you, as we do our reporting at the magazine, we're finding that patient care organization leaders, as we all know, hospitals are operating on very thin margins right now. So patient care organization leaders are really having to think before they invest in technology. It's not anything that costs more than a dime. You really
Yeah,
have to think
yeah.
about, right? So I think that's very wise advice. And I think that, and I'll ask you to respond to one last thing. We're still in early days in technology around AI, right? And I would hope that people would be very agile in their thinking, right? So that they're they can't be rigid. They can't be rigid and slow, but they also shouldn't just like rush to any technology. Do you think that hospital and health system leaders will be able to find that kind of happy medium where they're thinking carefully, but not waiting, 100 years
Yeah,
to move, right?
I would hope so. The challenge that we've seen with some of our customers is if they're centrally managed and their digital strategy is kind of centrally governed, they tend to do a better job of setting up the programs to explore new technologies, and then adopting the ones and deploying the ones that make sense. where you have some challenges is in decentralized, or where they're
Yeah.
very siloed thinking.
Yeah.
Because what ends up happening is that the owner of the budget for that clinical program makes a decision on a technology that may work for them, but doesn't apply across the board.
Yeah.
So I think, and that's, I don't want to say that everyone follows that approach, but we have seen that that centralized approach seems to be more successful in weeding through and enabling that technology once it's proven to be successful.
Right.
So that's what we've seen so far.
It's good IT governance and it's good project management.
Right. I agree. And that's where I think, from a CFO perspective, I think you really need to think twice about those siloed solutions, because you are going to end up paying for it over and over again, I think. So I really feel if they could figure out that right balance of speed and caution,
Right. Exactly.
maybe you get to that happy medium.
Exactly. Any closing thoughts, Mike?
Well, just that, just because I'm saying that, the technology might not be there yet. There is really good technology out there.
Yeah.
And I think if you focus on what you're trying to accomplish and what the goals are, it becomes easier to figure out what of those technologies you should try. I think just don't start with the shiny object, start with what the goal is, and then find the object that fits that. I think a lot of companies just go from the reverse because it sounds cool.
Yeah, absolutely. We're hearing more and more and more that in this day and age, at this moment in healthcare, you have to start with a strategy. And as you said earlier, you have to bring in the stakeholders and get the stakeholder view, right?
Yep. So, absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, so great to be with you today, Mike. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Great seeing you again. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So thanks again to Mike Brandolfino of Caregility. And thank you to you in our audience for viewing this session. This concludes this session, and have a great day. Thank you, everyone.